On Legally Blonde and Blind, I talk a lot about, being blind. But I think it's great to talk with other members of the disabled community, especially for me, those who developed a disability rather than being born with one. In today's episode, my amazing friend Jenna will join us to share how she developed and adapted to a tic disorder during the COVID-19 pandemic. We will talk about requesting accommodations, transitioning to college, and finding a place in the disabled community. Tune in to learn more about the intersection between disability and mental health. Welcome back to another episode of Legally Blonde and Blind. I am so excited to have a very special guest. She has known me since my silver sparkly hat days. Welcome, Jenna.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this episode with me today. I really appreciate you being willing to put yourself out there and talk with me today. We have a lot to get to, but first I want to give you the chance to introduce yourself, talk about what you're interested in, what you're studying, where you're from, etc.
Hi, so I'm Jenna. I'm a sophomore studying mechanical engineering at Stevens. Like hobbies, I love doing anything arts and crafts related, like sewing, painting. I like picking up random hobbies like crocheting, embroidering, like cross stitching. I also like to run. I did cross country for 4 years.
A fun fact about Jenna is she's one of the most creative and talented people I've ever met. For example, in high school, she made her own prom dress.
Yeah, that was fun.
It was like a Cinderella dress. It was huge. I have no idea how you did it.
Oh yeah, my sewing machine hated me. There were so many layers.
But anyways, to get started, I know that we were going to talk a bit about how your tic disorder developed and how you learned to manage that. So to get started, where that whole story began, what was it like for you moving to Stevens in August of 2020 when social distancing guidelines and other restrictions were still largely in place?
Yeah, it was very rough. It was so hard to meet people because the orientation was completely online. You had to make reservations ahead of time to go anywhere on campus, like the dining hall or the library. So it was just so easy to stay in the dorm all the time. And
you had to quarantine a lot too, didn't you?
Yeah, because my roommate kept having people who got COVID. Yeah, and I didn't know anyone from my high school, and I did end up finding a group of people, but the group was so large that I just got drowned out of every conversation, and it wasn't close enough for them to be in any core subgroups. So It was just very isolating and stressful.
I think what can happen is when you first move to college, people tend to congregate in these huge packs of 20 or 30. But I always found it hard too to try to make genuine connections within groups that large.
Yeah, definitely.
But so I know that your tic disorder started within this period of time when you were moving and adjusting to college. So as much as you're comfortable with sharing, how did that emerge?
So I had extremely mild twitches for years before. I just thought it was something that humans just did, that just everybody did. And a few months before I went to college, my boyfriend pointed them out to me and said I should probably go to the doctor for them. And I was like, nah, I'm probably fine. So then when I get to college in September, I just start twitching more often, to the point where I would sometimes complain about it, but still not enough to warrant worrying. And in October, it just gets so much worse. It goes from 30 times a day to literally hundreds. And there were
you would count, wouldn't you?
Yeah, the week leading up to my neurologist appointment, my mom told me to start counting how many times I did it, how many times I twitched, and it went from 30 to hundreds over the course of a week.
And this was within August, September of your first year at college, right?
It was October.
Okay. And so when you went to the doctor, how did you react to that initial diagnosis of a tic disorder? I know that there's like a distinction between like a tic disorder and Tourette's, where you have to have it for a certain period of time. But what was it like hearing that initial diagnosis?
Yeah, so at the time it was just the tic disorder. So I was weirded out because I didn't know what a tic disorder was, but I did like feel relief knowing that the twitches had an explanation behind them, and it wasn't like something dangerous like a heart condition or anything like crazy like that.
Yeah, you're right.
And
That's good to hear, at least.
yeah, and at the time it was just a tic disorder, which comes with the assumption that it'll go away in a few weeks or months. It wasn't Tourette's yet, so I still had hope.
And what was it like going from having, I guess, no disability whatsoever to having something that's rather visible to pretty much anyone you interact with?
Like I started feeling like I had something to prove, because I feel like if somebody doesn't know what Tourette's is and they saw me like twitching and making weird movements and sounds, they think I was like had some mental like impairment or was on drugs or something. And like Tourette's has like no impact on a person's intelligence, but I still sometimes feel like I have to try like extra hard in school so people don't think I just can't do anything.
And what was it like talking to your family and friends about it?
Well, my parents took care of explaining the whole thing to my family, but when I talk to it with friends, I try to keep it like lighthearted. Like I just be like, "Oh yeah, I just say and do weird things. Like I make weird noises and twitch a lot. It's a thing."
I think that relates to, in my first episode of this podcast, I talked a lot about how humor helps in terms of talking about and accepting different disabilities. And I think we both can relate in the sense that we could both joke about it, because sometimes I remember sometimes when we would hang out, your tics would just be perfectly timed for the situation.
Yeah, I got some like funny word association tics.
Yeah. So I think having that sort of lighthearted attitude towards it can be very helpful, especially when you're first trying to navigate those interactions, because I think people are they don't want to offend you, right? So I think sometimes people are very uncomfortable talking about it because they don't want to say anything that's going to set you off or make you more upset.
Yeah, like if I tic and it's funny, like I don't mind joking about it, and I don't mind people like making jokes about it.
And then I guess my question for you too is, so I know you had some verbal tics. I know they're not as prevalent, but so how did you handle like the verbal tics and specifically like cursing tics?
Well, I was like in denial that I even had vocal tics, because it just started out not with words but just saying like a bunch of times. And like I even talked to my mom about it, and she was like, "That's not how vocal tics develop. You don't have vocal tics." Meanwhile, like just keep saying and then it like eventually merged into up, and then it started turning into like actual words and sometimes even phrases. And it definitely was I don't want to say worse than the motor tics, because the motor tics I would like hit things, but like it was definitely, I would become more of a distraction to conversations. And if I was in in-person school, my vocal tics are more like distracting to other people
like
in
other
class.
People in a classroom.
Yeah, like, and I never cursed before getting Tourette's. Like, it's
No,
kind
you
of
never did.
Yeah, it's a myth that, oh, if you have it as a tic, that means you say it a lot. That is not true at all. I never cursed until I got Tourette's, and then now I just do it uncontrollably.
And I'm sure that's hard too in public, even if you're saying these phrases that are rather like socially unacceptable.
Yeah, oh my god, I suppress so hard when I'm like in front of children.
Oh yeah, like, you don't want to say it in front of little kids. But I think what's good at least is that, I mean, at least I could always tell, like, if you were having a cursing tic, you never sounded angry. So I think it's really easy for people to pick up on, hey, she's not trying to curse me out. Like, this something
Yeah, like it's very
going.
out of the blue, when like the tone I say it is very like
it's like
very
a very
ticky.
high-pitched voice. That's not even like you're angry at somebody.
Yeah.
But So I guess we already talked about this a little bit, but could you elaborate on, like, so how was it adjusting to tics as, like, part of your daily life? This is just like, what was it like going from, this is something wrong with me, this is a new diagnosis, to this is a part of my daily life now?
Yeah, so it was pretty hard because I went 18 years of my life being completely normal, and all of a sudden I struggle to do like basic things. Like when I'm doing homework, sometimes I'll just throw my pencil across the room, or like I just curse randomly. My knee buckles on me a lot, so I fall over a lot. So it's just like struggles to do basic things. Sometimes I have to like wait before I curl my hair or like use a knife because my hands are being too ticky. And I had to like pay more attention to what I was feeling and what was going on around me, because there's so many triggers, like loud noises, feeling anxiety, being in physical pain, or even just being too cold can just set off my tics.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Little things that you wouldn't think about could set it off. I remember even, like, if we go into a restaurant, you have to wear, like, noise canceling headphones, and it's a
Yeah.
shame, really, because I don't think people, like, are intentionally trying to set you off, but it's like if someone's screaming. Like, we went to a restaurant once where there was, like, a birthday party, and they had like the noisemakers inside the restaurant. Now, that was obnoxious,
Oh my
but
god, that was so bad. I wish I
that
had
was
my headphones
so bad.
then.
And I don't think you had your headphones with you, did
Yeah, no,
you?
I didn't. So I just had to like I was just covering my ears and just trying not to freak
Yeah,
out.
trying not to go crazy. But I think it's still amazing that you can, like, that you can, like, use a knife, do your makeup. She even cut her boyfriend's hair. But
And the
you
thing
did
is,
that a
when
few
you're
months ago, didn't you?
concentrated, your tics get much less severe. So when I was doing my boyfriend's hair, afterwards he was like, "You didn't motor tic once." Like I had some vocal tics, but I didn't motor tic one time during the
Yeah,
entire
it's the
process.
same thing when you drive.
Yeah, like I can still drive because I'm focused on the road, and it dampens my tics enough to where it's not dangerous.
And so going along with the, like, process of finding it out as, like, an initial diagnosis to more of just a part of, like, your life at this point, what was the process like when you were going through, like, different medications, trying to figure out, like, a way to suppress the tics, and how did you deal with those side effects associated with that?
Yeah, that was rough. Like I had the first medicine I tried put me to sleep all day, every day. Second medicine didn't do anything because those were when they didn't know the cause of the tics yet. So the first medicine was an anti-anxiety one. The second one was more geared to people with epilepsy. And then my third and were more geared to specifically Tourette's. Um, the so the third one worked for a little bit and then it wore off. So we kept upping the dose until the dose just became too much for my body. So then I started like passing out. I started zoning out of conversations all the time. Like it would just look like I was just not there in the head for like a few seconds at a time, just so often.
I remember that happened when we were playing Monopoly, and that was that. I mean,
Yeah, you guys had to drive me home because
it
I
was
just
really
couldn't.
scary to see, but I can only imagine what that had felt like for you in the moment.
Yeah, no, it feels just like completely zoned out. You can't move, you can't talk, you have to wait it out. And you're fully conscious when you're doing it, so it was just scary.
You just almost feel
Um
like frozen in place, I guess.
yeah. Yeah, and then the fourth medicine I was only on for 2 days because, like the first one, it just put me to sleep. So I have not found a medicine that actually, works for me. So I'm just going without medication right now, and just I'm on a waiting list for behavioral therapy to see if that might help me.
That sounds like a good idea. I'm sure too, with school starting this year, you don't want to be put in the position where you're trying all these new medications, because I can only imagine how difficult it would be to concentrate and do homework and do exams if you're zoning out or feeling like you're going to pass out or sleeping all
Oh
day.
yeah, I was on the first medicine while I was at college last year, and for a whole week I could barely function. Yeah, yeah.
That must have been extremely challenging, especially being away from home for the first time.
Yeah, I was just by myself dealing with like this whole new disorder that was crazy.
Yeah. So to
Uh,
shift a bit to talking about like how this has played out for you in college, I know you went from a position where you never really had to ask for help in school because you're low key a genius. But so what was that like for you having to ask for accommodations for the first time? Like, did it make you nervous?
yeah, I really was the type of person who just never asked for help. So when it got to the point where I did need accommodations, I kind of just ignored it. So when last year I kind of needed accommodations, I just didn't ask for it. So when I had exams on a bad tick day, I would just struggle so much through them. I could barely concentrate. I was at a very clear disadvantage, and yet I was still like, I'm fine. I can
I
handle this.
remember this very well. Adam, her boyfriend Adam and I, a very subtle campaign to get you to get accommodations.
Yeah, because like I had it in my head that like if I asked for accommodations, I would be like weak or too needy, or like I wasn't disabled enough to warrant accommodations because I technically can go without them. I just suffer a lot more. But then I got to
Which is
realize
why
that's literally the point. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it took me a bit, but I eventually did it. And it's been
Yeah,
a
I
lot
remember
better.
I made a post a few I think it was like a month or so ago about like email templates at the start of the school year for people that were requesting accommodations, and I remember Adam pointed it out and he was like, "She probably made this because of you." And I and I was like, "You might have been part of the intended audience."
Yeah, I used that outline you posted.
Oh, that makes me so happy that people actually used it. But so, what are some of the accommodations that like could help that help have helped you, or that could help somebody else with Tourette's?
So people with Tourette's are, it's very quiet to stay, it's very hard to stay quiet for long periods of time. So when someone is suppressing, it gets really mentally exhausting. And when you stop suppressing, you could get very ticky. So if you need to like let your tics out, you should be able to leave the classroom whenever you need to and just come back. And tics can also be like really distracting to not only the person with the disorder, but also people around them. So some accommodations I got are taking exams in a separate room and getting extra time on those exams.
That makes sense. That's a way for not only a way to like avoid distracting other people, but you don't have to worry about making tics during a test.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like it was hard for you going from Zoom where you could just mute yourself or turn off your camera to being in person in a lecture hall where you can't really
Yeah.
avoid like other people hearing your tics.
Yeah, I like whistle a lot and like do this like weird sniffle hiccup kind of sound a lot. But like it's not too bad. Like I haven't screamed the F word in class yet. So
That's good at the very least. I think too
uh,
people, I mean especially with the flu season starting, people are sniffling and coughing so much in class anyway. I don't even know if it makes that much of a difference. It's unbelievable to me. I'm like, wow, there's so many sick people in here right now. And I know it's not COVID,
yeah.
but still, it's like, oh, wow.
Yeah, because like everybody at my college is vaccinated, so it's like it probably can't be COVID.
Yeah, no,
It's just
it's like
regular.
flu or colds.
Yeah.
Still, so many sniffles. And so, what was that process like for you formally requesting accommodations? Did you find your school's disability office like helpful, responsive?
Yeah, it was so much easier than I thought it would be. I kind of had it in my head that they would be like, "Oh, you have to prove that you're disabled enough to warrant this," and but it was not like that at all. Like I literally just emailed the disability office. I told them what my condition was, told them accommodations I probably needed, used your outline for that bit. Then they emailed back to set up a time for me to call them. So then I talked to the disability director over the phone, and he just told me how to fill out the forms and just said that I needed a doctor's note. So I filled out the forms, got the doctor's note, and the disability director just emailed all my professors, and boom, accommodations.
There you go. That's great. It's nice to hear that it was such a seamless process for you, because I think we don't think about enough is how quickly you can go from not needing an accommodation at all to needing it. I think people think, when you think generally about disability and accommodations in the classroom, you think like, oh, it's something you're born with and you need right from the start, or you don't need anything at all. But I think your case and many others show that, you know, things can develop over time and needs can change over time. So it's really important to have like transparent and responsive systems so that you can get your needs met as quickly as possible.
Yeah, because like most people with Tourette's like develop it in childhood, early adolescence, and I think like the latest age that you can like be diagnosed is like 18 years old, and I got it at 18 years old. So
you were right at the cutoff.
yeah.
And then finally, what was it like telling well, I know that they emailed your professors, but did you have any like conversations with them about, oh, hey, I have Tourette's, this is what it looks like?
Yeah, so all my professors already got the email, so I decided to wait till the end of every first class to go up to the professor and introduce myself in person. And but the thing is that when I was filling out the form for the disability office, my like Workday Student, which is like the app that we use to schedule classes, it said that I had one professor for multivariable, but they switched it after I had sent the forms to the disability office. So
Oh,
my
so they didn't know.
multivariable teacher was not informed. Um, so that led to an awkward situation.
Did you,
What?
was that your multivariable professor?
Yeah, like I was like whistling in class, and he was like, "All right, whoever's phone that is, can you turn it off?" And I didn't process that he was talking about me. So I was just looking around the room being like, "Whose phone is that?" And then he was like, "Oh my god, please, whoever's phone that is, turn it off. It is extremely distracting to the class. Like, it sounds like a whistle." And when he said it sounds like a whistle, that's when I was like, "Oh my god." That's me. And I had to just announce the whole class that like, yeah, I got Tourette's. I can't control that. You gotta kind of deal with it.
And you said he apologized to you afterwards, right?
Yeah, because this teacher, he was a TA last year. This is literally his first year professoring and his very first day of being a
He
professor.
calls out a girl at Tourette's.
Yeah.
It's nice that he like took responsibility for his actions and acknowledged the fact that like it wasn't really fair of him to call you out like that. Like, people should have to announce to the class, oh, hey, by the way, I have Tourette's. Like, it shouldn't have to be this whole like presentation, if you will.
Yeah, as soon as I said that, he looked so scared.
He's like, oh wait, I'm no longer professoring anymore. I'm not tenured. I'm screwed.
Yeah, and he said he didn't get an email, and he didn't get the email because Workday just switched my professor last minute. But he was the only one that I had a bad experience with. Every other professor, I went to them after class, and I was like, yeah, I'm Jenna, I got Tourette, so if you hear some whistling back there, that's me, it's not a phone. And they were like, you're all good, don't even worry about it.
Yeah, I think most professors are pretty understanding, which is good. I think as long as you're transparent and you talk about it like right from the beginning, I think usually they're pretty understanding about like needing to make arrangements for tests and all that. And you can extend the time on tests too, don't you?
Yeah, 1.5 times.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Although I don't need it.
If you throw your pencil across the room, it's going to take you some time to go get the pencil.
Yeah, but the thing is that I don't need it every day. I only need it on very ticky days. So it's one of those things where it's like it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yes, that is the ultimate mantra with accommodations. It's better to have something down in the system in case you need it. You might not need it every time, but it's good just to have it there.
Yeah, like if I don't have a ticky day, I won't use the extra time on that day.
And so moving on to talk a bit more about like the like mental health side with the tic disorder. I know you said that there's been a recent uptick, no pun intended, in the tic disorders. In tic disorders, specifically amongst like adolescent girls, could you talk a little bit about that and that link?
Yeah, so there were some studies that said during the pandemic lockdowns, tic disorder symptoms like fully doubled in children and young adults, especially girls as opposed to guys, which is weird because guys are like 3 to 5 times more likely to develop tics. And there's a lot of debate on why this is, but the leading theory is that the stress and isolation related to the pandemic can set off tics. And like tic disorders and Tourette's, they're both hereditary and environmental. So if somebody with a family history of tics, like my uncle had tics when he was younger, and somebody with a family history of tics gets really stressed, the stress can like make the tics so much worse to the point where the disorder becomes apparent. And then once you start ticking, you just can't stop. Like you set it off and you're done for, you know?
Even like what you said, how you had a bunch of minor twitches when you were younger. I guess it's like if people are more susceptible to it, if some major stressor like the pandemic comes along, it can really make things worse.
Yeah.
Now, I know you touched a bit on this a bit, but so like how is your tic disorder related to anxiety, especially that caused by the pandemic?
Well, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, I was really stressed out about everything that was going on, but it wasn't enough to set the tics off. But when I was sent to college, knowing nobody, seeing nobody, a completely new city environment, that just pushed it over the edge for me.
So it's related to like, so if you're more anxious about something like a test or whatnot, the tics will in turn be more intense.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And so like, have you found any methods to, I guess, have you found any self-care methods that have been effective for you in terms of lowering that stress? I know when you have an anxiety disorder, people will say things like, have you ever tried mindfulness? Have you ever tried meditating? Like, as if that's going to solve everything, but have there been any sort of techniques that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, the thing is, my anxiety isn't like, oh, I have a test coming up, let me be anxious about that. My anxiety is very, like, I don't know, like instinctual, like it's very sensory based. Like if, like loud noises, feelings I don't like that's more what my anxiety is based in. So taking showers really helps a lot. Like I barely ever tic when I'm in the shower. And just doing something that focuses me on something. Like if I'm not super ticky, I can paint my nails or do my makeup. Just something that's distracting that I can do.
That makes sense. And do you find that with homework too? Like if you're doing schoolwork, do you find that you have less tics because you're really concentrated on that?
Yeah. Like on really bad tic days, it doesn't matter how concentrated I try to be. It's just bad. But on most days, once I get going on my homework, I'm pretty much set.
After you developed your tic disorder, did you join any online communities or meet any other people with the condition? And if so, how did that help you?
So I don't know anybody in person with Tourette. Like I met some people like when I worked at Gitano's, there was a guy that came in and he was like, "Oh yeah, I have Tourette, but I take medicine for it, so I don't like tic anymore." And so I've never seen somebody in person with tics as severe as mine. But I did used to watch like online creators like this Trippy Hippie or Sweet Anita, and they really helped me see people like with the same condition, with this dealing with the same things that I deal with. So it was just really good in like knowing that I'm not alone in this.
I think it's funny too because I remember I even got some videos on FYP about it, about like the like onset of tic disorders amongst like people within your age group, and it is very creepy how accurate that FYP of TikTok is. I've talked about it with some other guests where we would get recommended like blind or albino creators even if we didn't really explicitly search that on TikTok. So
Yeah,
like,
I got like
person show up here.
Yeah, I got this Trippy Hippie videos on my For You page before I even had the tic disorder. like before I even knew what a tic disorder was, I had her come up on my For You page, and I was like, huh, that's a strange condition.
So now
Like,
the algorithm can predict the future as well. That's ever so slightly concerning.
yeah.
I guess the good thing, though, is it connects you to people that you wouldn't have otherwise met.
Yeah.
Like, it's creepy, but it's cool that you get to, at least for me, it was cool that I got to see other, like, albino creators on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And so
yeah,
finally,
it's definitely nice.
And so finally, we've touched on this a bit, but I know that you moved back into Stevens a few weeks ago. Things are a lot different now, obviously, because everyone on campus is fully vaccinated. So how have you found that process transitioning again to in-person classes and social events with this tic disorder?
Oh, it's so much better than last year. Like, I've been at college for about 3 weeks now. And I already have like an amazing group of friends that I feel comfortable with, and they don't mind my tics. There was one time I like started walking backwards, and one of them just like caught me, so I stopped walking backwards. I've been able to actually join clubs. They had a reorientation for sophomores who didn't get a real orientation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's
so that
where
way
I
you
met
actually
most
know
of my
where to
friends.
go on campus.
Yeah. And there's also like other fun stuff like around Hoboken, like the Italian Street Festival. Like, I want a stuffed duck there. And it's really nice getting to dress up in cute outfits every day and just get better at makeup because I get to do that more often.
That's my favorite too. Like, it makes you feel like you're ready to take on the day. You feel so much more productive.
Yeah, it's just so much better. And like my roommates have the rundown of like the conditions, so if I'm ever super ticky, they're not worried.
Yeah, and they know not to be too loud or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. I don't know if you've had this experience, but at least for me, I found that one thing that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something I wasn't expecting. Is that so? If you once you, at least for me, because I had our friend group. For those who don't know, we've been friends since I've known Jenna since like third grade, and the majority of our friend group has been together since middle school. So I like everyone knew about my albinism, right? So it was a bit strange for me going from having everybody in my hometown know about it and not really need to ask any questions to pretty much having to explain it a lot more often. And it worked out well for me because this was after I had started the podcast, so I guess I was more used to it anyway. But it was an interesting transition. I noticed. I didn't know if you had that similar experience. You just had to be like, oh, I have Tourette's more often just because you're around so many new people.
Yeah, like when I first got here, I didn't immediately tell people. I like waited till I like waited until I did like a more extreme tic to be like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I have Tourette's. But that led to some people being like, yeah, I noticed you doing like weird stuff, but I didn't want to like say anything. So to avoid situations like that where people are like, what is she doing? Why is she acting so weird? I just tell people like right on the spot when I meet them that like,
I agree. I found that in my experience too. If you just share it right away, it leads to like the least amount of awkward encounters, and just so everyone's on the same page about it.
Yeah, but everybody's been like pretty understanding. So
yeah, it seems like you have a really good group of friends right now, and I know Adam and your family and our friends back home have all been like very supportive and understanding. So I'm sure that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so before we go, do you have any pieces of advice for anybody who is going through like a tic disorder or Tourette's, especially as they're looking to transition from virtual to in-person events again?
Yeah, so pretty much you don't have to be self-conscious about your tics. Like, any decent human being will accept you and not be bothered at all. Also,
It's
let
on them if they don't.
Yeah, let your roommates know not just about the tics, but also tic attacks, just in case you have one in your dorm. Like, a couple weeks ago, I couldn't stop saying, "Can I have scissors?" over and over again for like 2 hours straight. So just like let them know in case that happens to you. And just make clear with your friends like what you're comfortable with conversation wise. Like, do you allow jokes about your condition? Ask if you're okay every time you hit something or fall over. Just whatever you're comfortable with, just let them know. And,
or like if you need help, like getting, like if you fall backwards or something, like what are they supposed to do?
Yeah, I didn't warn them about the walking backwards tic, so I'm glad they picked it up and like caught me when I started doing that.
Yeah, you should look into tour guiding then, because if you're walking backwards, you're all set. But no, I think that the communication that you've set with us, like at least in the dynamics in our friend group at home, has been very helpful, so that we kind of know how to approach it, and it removes that sort of stigma around it. Like, it doesn't have to be something that makes you feel awkward or uncomfortable. It can be something that you can talk about.
Yeah, like as long as somebody doesn't like mean it demeaningly, like, oh, you probably can't go to college because of your condition, or like succeed in life because of it. As long as it's not demeaning, like I allow people to talk about it.
And I think that's a good way to go. So if you're comfortable, do you want to share like any of your social media handles? I know you do have a TikTok that you post on every so often. If you want to share any of that, here's your opportunity.
Yeah, so my Insta is just my name, and my TikTok is Jenana44, which is just Jenna plus an NA and then 44. My Insta, I don't really talk about Tourette's at all, but on my TikTok, a lot of videos I do tic in the videos. I don't tic in every single video because they're very short videos and tics are very like variable throughout the day. But yeah, I have the most Tourette's content on my TikTok, and my Instagram is just like pretty normal.
Just gorgeous pictures of Jenna just living her life.
Yeah.
I'll be sure to put the links in any of the posts I make about this episode so that people can find you and connect with you if they're interested. Well, thank you again, Jenna. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. I know you're so busy at Stevens, and I can only imagine as a girl boss, woman in STEM, how much work it is for you. So thank you again for putting yourself out there. I know we've talked about this before, but for me, like, the blindness was always something that was a part of my life, whereas for you, this is something that has happened rather recently. So I really appreciate you putting yourself out there and being willing to talk about something that puts you in a bit of a vulnerable spot.
Yeah, of course.
Well, everyone, that was Jenna. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. A fun story about recording was that we did this on a Saturday morning a few weeks ago. I was in my dorm room, and I had thought that if I record in the morning, all the people who were partying the night before will still be asleep, and therefore will not make any noise. But at some point in the episode, we're in the middle of talking, and I hear this insanely loud laughter. It was almost like screaming. So I was able to cut most of it out, but if you heard a strange sound at some point in the episode, it's not very distracting. It's just at one moment. That's what it was. My friend Alana, she was on the show a few months ago. She has an ESA, so she soundproofed her whole room. She has these foam pads all covering all of her walls. And she asked me, she was like, "Do you want to use this room to record your podcast?" And I was like, "No, I'm sure it'll be fine." And then this happened. And I was like, God, I wish I was in the foam room of pure silence. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe to Legally Blonde and Blind on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow Legally Blonde and Blind on social media at legallybb_ for Instagram and at Legally Blonde and Blind on Facebook. Thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you soon.